Good morning. We are now starting the first event of our cycle of seminars called Culture, Climate and Action. This seminar corresponds to an academic exchange action of this program called Roots and Resilience, a project where myself, Leandro Valiati, am a co-investigator with Paul Harrington, and a project executed by the People's Palace Projects team. This cycle of seminars will have 4 events on 4 dates where we will discuss. On the first date, today, climate change and how to protect heritage. In the second event, on the 13th of April, we will talk about how to understand policies for the relation between climate change and cultural heritage. On the 20th of April, the name of the event will be Artivism, the artist in the face of disasters. On the 27th, Paths to Resilience, how communities can design, project a future. We will have, therefore, a month full of large, comprehensive events, very focused, talking about how culture can have a relevant role in constructing policies for social and economic development. As the world is going through a process, this research process has the objective of producing insights, evidence on how art and culture can liaise as conductors of local economic development. It is partnered by the Inhotim Institute and 5 important cultural and artistic organizations from the Iron region in Minas Gerais. The project is financed by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, UK, the Media, Culture and Sports Department, and also the People's Palace and Project from Queen Mary University of London and University of Chester. I won't go on too long because I believe that our guest and debater today is here to give a great contribution to the beginning of this debate. These debates will be every Wednesday, where we will be together focused on this cycle of seminars. Today we have Shirley Krenak, our speaker, and our debater today. Shirley is from the Krenak indigenous people from eastern Minas Gerais state in Brazil. She's a teacher, writer, and an activist in leadership fighting for indigenous rights in the sacred lands against mining. To mediate Shirley's presentation, we have Jurema Machado, a very important Brazilian cultural manager with a history of leadership from the National Cultural and Historical Heritage Center and a champion of our culture. I give the floor now to Jurema and Shirley, and I wish you all a great discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Leandro. Before giving the floor to Shirley, who will actually take the floor and who we are here to listen to, I'd like to reinforce, as from the description that Leandro gave of the project, that we have before us a very concrete opportunity to work on culture issues in the face of territory. The project elected that region in the state of Minas Gerais in the Iron Square, as the region is called, very much affected by mining, the mining process with its external aspects and its very heavy difficulties emphasized by climate issues. And this is such a complex issue And we are here to, well, work on this theme, but we are here to think about the presence of communities, civil society organizations, cultural organizations who are there permanently dealing with this theme. In other words, we try to associate academic work and theoretical reflection with a practice that only these groups um, in the region can talk about. And that is the reason for inviting Shirley Krenak here to talk to us, who is, well, more than any conjecture and assumption, she is there experiencing these challenges and devising ways to work and fight within this context. So I'll give the floor to Shirley so she can tell us about her experience in the light of these complex relationships between mining, the climate issue, and how the cultural issue um, exists within this challenge, how it resists, how she seeks conciliation or transformation, how all this takes place. And following her presentation, we hope to have a round of Q&A, which Shirley will help us to unravel. So Shirley, you have the floor.
Olá, Ererê, a todos, gratidão.
Good morning, Arehe, you all. Very grateful once again for your invitation from People's Palace Projects and this opportunity to exchange knowledge. We as human beings are here to listen to each other and learn together.
De logo de início, eu começo já marcando
Straight up, I'd like to thank you for your beautiful opening of this work with my Krenak
faz parte de todo esse processo de trajetória
song,
desde
which is part of our tradition of resilience, resistance,
de uma esperança no futuro.
and hope in and for the future.
Inata krutek petupina Nimparen makiam Nimparen makiam Nimparen makiam. Era gratidão. Para iniciar nossa fala,
Thank you very
meu nome é Shirley
much.
Jukurna Krenak.
To
Jukurna
start off,
significa
my name is Shirley
vida,
Jukurna
sempre
Krenak.
constante em luta.
I'm a living spirit, always
Para
fighting.
dar início, fora Bolsonaro, né?
And to start off,
Fora
out,
Bolsonaro.
Bolsonaro out, my
Segundo,
first message.
demarcação
Second,
já. Nós temos uma urgência imensa
land
na
marking
demarcação
now.
das nossas terras.
Our lands
E
needs to be
não a demora das
demarked. It's
instituições
very
no
urgent.
cumprimento
Not this delay by institutions to comply
nos
with
coloca em
laws,
risco.
which put
Não
us
o
at
PL da
risk.
Restituição
No
141/2020.
to the
Não ao marco temporal, não a PL
legal decision. No to PL 490, other legal
um marco temporal que
rulings,
vem querendo nos dizer o que
temporal
nós
rulings,
somos
which
nessa
keep
terra.
wanting to
Nós
tell us
somos
about
povos
our time on
milenares,
this land. We are
estamos
millenary
dessa terra
peoples.
desde que
We've
nos
been on this land, protecting it
nascemos.
since the world
Não à
exists,
violência
basically.
racial,
No to racial
não ao
violence,
racismo ambiental,
no to
racismo
environmental
ambiental, meninas,
racism,
mulheres,
which
não
has
só
been
contra
throwing
a
mud and
exploração
slurry
da nossa
from
água,
iron
desse
mining
nosso
on our
território,
lands and in our
não ao
souls and into
estupro
our bodies.
de
No
crianças
to
indígenas que
the rape of
foram
indigenous
usadas por
children,
garimpeiros dentro de
raped
suas
by
terras originárias.
prospectors in their
Não ao
original lands.
espírito
No
moral
to the
e
mental,
ao
spiritual
respeito aos
rape
corpos dos povos
with
indígenas
regard to the bodies of the indigenous
sobre
peoples
essa terra. Uma terra que é nossa,
on this land,
uma
a
terra
land
que
that is
Deus
ours,
fez para nós,
a land made for us to
e
stay
que
by the
a
Grand Master,
sociedade que hoje
and which
faz parte de
society
toda essa
that nowadays, that currently is
tudo
part
do
of
universo
this
que foi
whole realm of universe, so to speak, has been
Erro seu
destroying
de não
due
escutar
to the
a voz
fact
dos originários.
that they do not listen to the voices of the
Isso
original
vem nos
peoples.
preocupando muito, né?
And this has
O fato
been
dessa
very
sociedade
concerning
sem
to us
freio não estar
because
nos
the fact
escutando,
of that this
todo
society
mundo
who
está
hates
passando
us
por
not
diversas
listening to us
situações
has led to people going through
já
many, many
todas as leis
problems connected to
que
all
diz respeito ao
areas
direito do ser
with
humano de viver
respect to
bem.
human
Quando nós
beings'
falamos do
rights
direito do ser
to
humano
live
de viver bem,
decently.
nós
When we
falamos
talk
de
about
todas as áreas.
human beings' rights to
Saúde,
decent living, I'm talking about
lazer,
all areas:
moradia,
leisure, health, education,
meio
housing,
ambiente, aqui.
environment, politics, and policies.
E eu estava numa reunião agora cedo
I was at a meeting earlier
e
today
muitas das pessoas
where
que fazem parte do
many
nosso trabalho
people
nos vê, nós,
who are
nos
part
vê
of
como
many
parte da
projects, they
história.
see
Não que o rato
us,
também não tenha lá
the
a
indigenous
sua importância.
peoples,
Mas é como
as
se as
rats.
pessoas olhassem
Not
para
that
nós só
rats
como
don't have
parte
their
daquele
importance,
todo,
but
sabe?
it's like people only looked
Que é
at us as
planejado. E a gente
study
fica
objects,
irritado com
objects to
isso.
be used, and we're sick and tired of that.
Ser a parte
I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of being
de um laboratório a ser estudado. Então,
part
essa
of
é a
a
dinâmica que
lab
está
rat to
tendo
be
aí.
studied. We, the indigenous peoples,
Ações de
are
ocupar espaços, principalmente
studying
nas redes
and thinking of
educacionais,
actions to
áreas
occupy
políticas,
spaces in educational networks, political,
e
scientific
uma
areas,
inquietude muito grande, porque a gente quer sair, a gente não
which is
quer
very
ficar, né, nesse
um,
espaço de ser estudado,
comprehensive.
quer
We
ser
don't want
a
to
sociedade que está ao
just be
nosso redor.
studied. We want
Porque a
to
gente está cansado
study
de
the
ver tanta
society
violência,
around
a gente
us.
está cansado de
We're
ver tanto
really
sofrimento
sick and tired of seeing so much
da nossa
suffering,
parte.
so much
Então
misery,
agora nós estamos usando a
and all
caneta
this
como
pillage of
ferramenta de
our
trabalho.
Mother
Nossa
Earth.
arma é a caneta,
We're
nossa
using
arma é nossa
pens.
inteligência
Our
para ocupar esses
weapon
espaços.
are our pens. We
E
want to use
mostrar
our
a verdadeira
intelligence
forma de
and try
trabalhar
to show the true way to
num processo
work
coletivo e não individualista, né?
collectively and not
O
individually.
individualismo vem matando as pessoas,
Individuality, individualism has been
se
killing
distanciando
people,
elas uma das outras,
has been
porque o individualismo traz a
alienating,
narcisismo,
distancing them from one
o
another.
individualismo traz o ego,
Individualism brings
e o
greed
ego
for
traz
power,
destruição.
ego.
Como
Ego
exemplo aqui
results in
conosco, no
destruction.
nosso
It's the
rio,
example I
foi
give
destruído
of our
pela
Atu
mineração.
River, which was
E a gente
destroyed
vê
by
hoje várias
mining
minerações da
operations
Samarco.
by
E
Vale,
mesmo que as
BHP,
pessoas
and
ficam aí
Samarco,
mostrando que estão
the three
fazendo
mining
um
companies
trabalho
who
social em
nowadays
diversas
go into
áreas,
the media saying they're doing a lot of social work,
sociedade,
social
isso
projects,
é,
but in
é
reality,
só purpurina.
that's
Nós
just
realmente estamos
confetti,
destruindo
really.
muito.
They are really,
E
in
o
fact,
interessante é que nós
destroying a
aqui em
lot.
Água Doce não é
To
brincadeira não.
destroy 700
Todo mundo
kilometers of
esquece, né? A sociedade esquece
freshwater
muito
river.
rápido do que as
It's no
represas
joke, and
fazem
people
pela
forget very
sociedade.
quickly what
Não só aqui,
the
mas
companies
nós
are
temos
doing to
território onde a sociedade
lands and
toda
territories,
né,
not just indigenous territories, but
acontece.
where everyone lives,
Na
all
Praia Bento
territories.
Rodrigues, aqui em
Here at
Mariana,
Bento
e todos
Rodrigues
os outros
Dam,
municípios
Mariana, and
que
all
viviam dessa água
municipalities and
muito
towns who
estão passando por essas
subsisted off the
dificuldades.
river water, they are going through many
Nós
difficulties.
passamos por esses problemas até hoje, porque
We
nosso rio
are
parou.
still going through this
O
problem
povo não tem
because
peixe
our
naquele rio.
river
E o
is
povo não
dead.
toma banho no rio
The
Atu
people
mais.
don't eat fish from that river or bathe in it anymore because it's full of
Tudo
iron ore.
devido a essas
All
observações
this
que eu fiz
due
aqui
to
no
these
local.
observations I made at the
E é
beginning of my
como se nada
presentation.
tivesse acontecido.
And it's as if
E aí
nothing had
veio
happened.
Brumadinho,
And
matou
then
mais de
comes
200
the
pessoas.
crime in Brumadinho, killing over
Mas
200
ninguém
people
fala. Ninguém
that
fala.
almost no one mentions. Nobody mentions it. It's all
Mas
being
até que
forgotten.
ponto ser
But
humano
how far
vai cair no esquecimento? Porque não vai
will
demorar
humans
muito para
continue to
acontecer
forget this?
guerras
Because it won't
por um
take
copo de água.
a long time
Já estão
before
acontecendo.
wars start because of a glass of
Guerras
water.
na
Wars are already
da
taking
Alemanha
place,
contra a
not
Ucrânia,
just in
mas em outros países.
Germany or the
Guerras
Ukraine, but in
financiadas
other
pelos
countries.
impérios. Porque
Wars
assim é que
financed
você
by
faz
iron
guerra.
ore, because it's with iron ore that weapons are made to kill other people.
Tudo acontecendo através
Everything
desse processo
happening
do capitalismo. O
through
capitalismo
this
que avança, que
capitalistic
destrói, que acaba
process
com
that
tudo.
advances,
Até certo
destroys,
ponto, nós, enquanto seres
destroys
humanos,
everything.
nós
But how
precisamos
far?
pensar em um trabalho
Well, we as
que
human
possa
beings need to
equilibrar
think about
todas as
working in a
nossas
balanced way where we can use our tradition plus science and technology in a positive way without causing damage to our environment, without causing damage to society, to human beings. In Brasilia, a movement is now taking place where we are camping out there. Many relatives of mine are there. They're all focused on the concentration of these issues that I've just talked about. We have not 1 minute of peace. Every day we struggle, fight, we wake up without peace. How long or when will we, indigenous peoples, be in peace and have peace? Could it be that we will survive for that long? While there are indigenous peoples on this earth, there will be air for you to breathe. There will still be water that you will be able to drink. But it's really getting difficult. It's not easy for us. Many people ask me, where do your people or peoples get so much energy and build up so much resistance? Well, if it were not for our ancestral way of understanding the world, we would probably have already given up the fight. Because if you think about it, you see a river which has welcomed you since you were born, being killed, being destroyed, its essence totally broken and shattered, and you still find the strength to continue fighting, seeking positive actions to make this world a better place where everyone can survive and live well. The Krenak people's strength comes from the light, the warriors of light, the warrior of light who protect us every day. It comes from rooting, of having our head in the land. The strength of the Krenak people comes from this view of future, a future without iron ore, without prospecting, mine prospecting, where all biomes can be respected, so that all biomes can be fully recovered, because we know that alone we won't be able to afford this continuity to the existence of the planet and all life. We need biomes to exist. Many people focus on one single biome, and that concerns me. That worries me actually, because many of the other biomes are being destroyed by many industrial and business projects which have been really, really mistreating other indigenous people who are in those biomes. There are no indigenous peoples just in the Amazon region. They are in many other biomes, the Cerrado, the Brazilian drylands, parts of the southeast that are not the Amazon necessarily. It's very sad to see all this happening. And even so, this within this sadness and in this continued struggle, we place ourselves in a process of forgiveness, literally forgiveness, forgiving. Because if we were not strong enough to forgive within our chests, within our hearts, we would not be fighting with all our strength as we are currently doing. We have our spirituality criticized by this religious spirit which is advancing within indigenous communities, causing a lot of fighting, a lot of spiritual destruction of each people. We know that these churches, regional churches that come into our territories, they only have one objective, which is to do away with our spirituality, end it, so that this ruralistic landowners mindset within this political world can
É
also
isso
come
que é
into,
tudo de
permeate our
política.
lands. Even that's becoming
E estamos
difficult.
até
People
com
are
grandiosidade
playing
das
around even
religiões
with
e
the
das espiritualidades, né?
grandiosity of religions and spirituality.
E a questão política está muito forte
And the
também,
political issue, of course, is very
porque
strong because
todo esse dano que esse governo do
all
Bolsonaro
this
vem fazendo
damage
nas
caused
nossas
by
vidas,
and made by Bolsonaro's
na nossa
government
paz,
in our
a
lives,
gente tem que
taking away
contar
our
muito
peace,
com a ajuda
we
dos
really have to
políticos que
count
ainda
on the
têm
help of
instituições que ainda têm
some
princípios e a
institutions who
proteção dos
still
povos
have
originários que
in
habitam a
mind
nossa terra,
the
para
protection of
fazer esse
the
processo
original
político, né,
peoples
fazer
of this land
esse
to
contato
devise
para poder
policies and
trazer
to
força para o nosso
create
movimento, para a
this
nossa luta,
contact,
para o nosso
bringing
movimento.
strength to our movements,
Porque o
our
Bolsonaro ele vem
struggles and
trazendo
fights.
muita
The
tristeza,
Bolsonaro government has really
não
caused
só para
and
o povo
brought a lot of
indígena, porque
sadness,
brasileiro
not
também
just for the
sofre
indigenous
muito, mas
peoples,
também
but
porque
black peoples and
traz os direitos
non-indigenous
das pessoas
society as
para
well, because
ficando
to remove people's rights,
normal nesse
this is
governo,
something that's becoming normal
algo
within this
normal.
government.
E o pior é que parece que as pessoas
And sad
estão
thing is that
como se nada estivesse
people seem
acontecendo.
to
Então eu espero
think
que
nothing's really happening,
nesse
business as usual.
novo tempo que está
I
se
hope that
aposta,
within this new
as pessoas
era,
possam escolher o melhor
political
para
era
os
that's
candidatos,
about to
né?
start now,
Nós
people can
estamos vendo
choose
que
their
nós indígenas temos uma
candidates
força muito
better.
grande de ocupar
We, the
espaços
indigenous peoples, are
para fazer valer
coming in
a
very
nossa voz,
strongly to
né?
occupy political spaces
E
so our voices may
mostrar
be heard,
para ir enfrentando o homem louco
to show
que a forma que ele
that
levantou a mentalidade política está sendo errada. E
that
aí, em nós,
to the
povos
political
indígenas,
system as it
precisamos
stands, that their
ocupar
political
para
mindset is
mostrar
wrong, and indigenous
não só os
people
homens
must
indígenas, mas as
occupy these
mulheres
spaces to show
indígenas também têm
how not
inteligência
just indigenous
suficiente
men but
para
also
governar de
indigenous
forma
women
correta e
have
forma justa,
sufficient are intelligent enough to govern
todas essas
correctly
questões
and fairly, taking into account all
de
these
importância
issues
do direito dos
vis-a-vis
seres humanos.
the importance of human
Então,
beings' rights.
só
Well, that's
complementar a
what I had
fala,
to say.
eu não sou muito de ficar de blá blá blá,
I'm not really
eu
one
gosto
to
de
keep
falar.
rambling on.
Eu
I
espero que
say
as
what's
pessoas tenham
necessary. But I hope
o
people
entendimento de que,
understand that,
principalmente nós mulheres, eu aprendi que nós somos mulheres infinitas.
especially we women, I've learned that we are
Nós
infinite
carregamos dentro de
women.
nós uma força
We all
poderosa
carry within us
que é a
a
força de
force which only
gerar frutos.
increases the force of generating
E que tipo de fruto a gente quer
fruits.
gerar daqui para frente?
And what kind of fruit do we want to generate from now on?
Nós mulheres
And how
nos enraizar
can we women
para ter um entendimento
firm our roots even more
de
to understand even more the collective awareness of rebuilding,
com novos
of reconnecting ourselves with this new life process? Arehe, thank you.
Obrigada, Shirley. Sua fala foi super
Thank you,
interessante ao
Shirley.
longo
What you said was very interesting, and as I heard you speaking, I was comparing that with some questions that had come up, and I saw that you were somehow already answering these questions. And I'm going to use part of what you said and connect them to these questions, hopefully for you to develop some more of these themes. I found it very interesting when you said that indigenous peoples currently have the clarity to see that they no longer want to be the objects of study, but they want to study, build, report, describe, use the mechanisms of knowledge and science in order to understand themselves better and to be better understood. You said that, actually. Textually, we no longer want to be studied, we want to study and be protagonists in education, teaching, knowledge transmission. One question we got, which complemented what you said, is by Rafael from Itabira. He asked, how can you tell the history of indigenous peoples that is not told? What mechanisms are there to facilitate the exchange of information and knowledge of indigenous peoples? There are a few other questions before that, this one, but that one really matches what you had said. Would you like to comment on that, Shirley? Or shall I ask a few more questions and then we'll join them all together? No, no, that's fine. I work a lot with education because I believe that positive actions can only be built through good education. Family education, collective education, education in school. In actual fact, in all books, we are the anthropophagus peoples, right? We ate people. That's ridiculous. This statement is ridiculous because my people, especially, was used very in a very defamatory way, derogatively. You have the impression that in the past, my people would not eat the wonderful fruits and roots in our forests to eat human flesh, especially colonizers. That was used a lot. So something could be taken away and embedded in Europe that people had to come here and kill us. This my mediocre idea is still carried along that we were anthropophagus people. That's not true, that's a lie. Also, we, especially young indigenous peoples, are using the communication media in a very intelligent way in order to value everything that we take from nature. We are also improving technology in order to show positive actions, especially within educational processes. If you go to APBIB website, COIN, CREAB, if you go to the Institute's Instagram of the Krenak Institute, you will find a lot of local work for education that you can use within your educational area. The communication media, especially with regard to indigenous issues, focuses on that. There are many indigenous writers who, with marvelous stories, many indigenous youths with their Instagram moving in and within and moving the social media, especially with young people from the educational sector, to tell the real history of the indigenous peoples of Brazil. Google, YouTube, social media, there's a lot of good stuff. You just have to know how to use this tool well. Shirley, what also drew my attention was that you spoke generally about the resistance of the indigenous peoples. Where does it come from? How would this resistance come from? An ancestral way of understanding the world. I'm trying to repeat what you said. To understand the rooting of the communities in your world, in your context, and also the vision of the future that they built based on this rooting and this vision of the world. Now, Laura from Belo Horizonte asked a question that I think complements what you said when you said that indigenous peoples show permanent resistance and that this resistance would be connected, linked to your vision of the world. Laura asks you about alternative resistances in the face of this dependence on mining. How other kinds of work can we bring into this capitalist world? This has to do especially with those affected by this economic model. I think, first of all, we're going to have to reinforce this struggle to reforest mines, right?
I think to start a whole new structure about how to work everything that involves progress in capitalism. Unfortunately, everything you try to do now, you're going to need taxes. We have to, in the days we are living in, we have to put that on the scales. It would be excellent if we did not need resources for anything. If we needed no resources for anything, forests would still be standing. But
trabalho, esse processo
since
de
all this
colonização e
work, this
demorou, a
colonization
gente
process
precisa,
has changed
buscar,
and everything has
de
changed,
forma
we need to
inteligente,
seek
colocar muitas coisas
intelligently
nessa balança.
to
De que forma
put
utilizar o
many things on this
capitalismo e o
scale,
progresso,
how to use
com
capitalism and
ações
progress
positivas para
as positive
que
actions
consigamos trazer de volta tudo que a mineração
that will
destruiu.
help us to bring back
Onde,
everything that
por
mining
onde
has
começar?
destroyed.
Primeiro, para a gente
Where
começar, a
do we
gente
start?
precisa
First of all, to
reeducar a
start,
mente das
we
pessoas.
need to re educate people's minds.
Numa reeducação que
Within
plante
re
sementes,
education,
mas as sementes
we have to plant
não
these
precisam,
plant seeds.
literalmente, não tem que ser só
But these
plantada na terra, tem
seeds
que ser plantada
do
na
not have
mente
to be only
de gente
literally
para
planted
que todo mundo
in
pense,
the
ah,
soil,
vamos
but
fazer um
in
projeto, vamos
people's
plantar
minds,
árvores.
so people
A
can
questão não é
think
só
we're
plantar
going to
árvores,
plant trees, for example. When
a
we're
questão é
talking about soil, it's not just about
ter
planting trees.
entendimento da
It's about
importância de
understanding
plantar
the
uma árvore,
importance
né?
of
E principalmente
planting
dentro do nosso
a
estado de
tree,
Minas Gerais, a gente
especially
precisa
within
trabalhar
my
muito esse
state of
processo de
Minas Gerais. We
reflorestamento
really
urbano,
have to
reflorestar
work
a
on
mente das
this
pessoas,
re-education
principalmente aqui
process.
no estado de Minas Gerais,
Reforest
é
people's minds, especially
fundamental.
in the state of Minas Gerais, is
Nós, Belo
very
Horizonte,
necessary.
por exemplo,
The
ao
city,
redor
the
dela,
capital, Belo
várias coisas
Horizonte,
estão em processo de
around it,
exploração.
what
Corre
you
um
most
grande
see are
risco aí,
mining
daqui um
companies. There
tempo,
is a
quando uma
great
barragem
risk
dessa estourar,
in a
vai
while
invadir
that
todo
one
o
of
BH.
these dams will
E
break and
essa
invade the
e
city
parece que o
of
pessoal não está
Belo
nem aí.
Horizonte
Então, para
because
que
of
a gente
mining, and
possa
people don't really
ter
seem to care.
uma,
So,
uma,
in
uma,
order to
uma ação
rebuild an
próxima, efetiva
action
para o futuro,
that is
né? É
our
muito
own and
necessário
collective at the
que o
same
nosso
time, it's
Estado possa
extremely necessary
trabalhar de
that our
forma
state
firme e
can work
verdadeira, né, através do processo
truly
da
and
escuta, que isso é muito
steadfastly
importante,
with
porque
the listening
ultimamente
process, because
fazer
recently
pesquisa não
to
está
carry out,
dentro do
to
processo
do
da escuta.
surveys
São
is
pesquisadores
not within the listening
que assim,
process,
sítios
it seems.
de
But these
pesquisa,
are vices,
é super
that we
necessário o
carry
processo da
on
escuta, né, da oralidade, para se reconstruir
from the
um
past. So it's
novo
about morality, where
debate,
we have to
um novo modelo
reconstruct new work,
equilibrado
a new model, a new balanced
de
model
entendimento de como utilizar
to
as
understand
nossas
how to
matérias-primas,
use
principalmente no
our
que diz
raw
respeito à
materials,
justiça.
especially
Porque
with regard
Minas
to
Gerais
iron ore, because the state of
está
Minas
nesse
Gerais
risco muito
is at
alto
a critical level, at an
de,
extremely high level
de extinção do que resta
of
ainda da nossa
extinction
Mata
of
Atlântica,
what
que
is
são
still left
7%
of
da
our
originalidade
Atlantic
dela.
rainforest, which
Somos
is only at
doadores de tantos
7% of its original
recursos
size,
biônicos, né?
12% if you count the
E é
mixture
super
of all
necessário esse
biomes.
processo da
And
educação.
it's extremely
Esse processo
necessary.
não,
This
gente, não avança.
re-education is very necessary, or else we will not move on. We will
Esse
not
processo
advance.
educacional como um processo, que você usou a expressão
Yes,
reflorestar mentes,
educational process,
sobre esse
as you
um
said,
processo
reforesting,
longo,
replanting
né, que tem que
minds.
ter uma
It's a
perspectiva de
long
tempo, não
process
é esse
where you
tempo, né?
need
O
a
Ailton
perspective of
Krenak
time.
defende muito essa nossa visão
Ayrton
de fast
Krenak
progress e
criticizes
flash,
our
né, que
view when
você
he
tem
talks about flash progress,
talvez objetivos
where
muito
you have
restritos
very
e acredita
restricted
numa velocidade de
objectives
transformação das
and
coisas, que de
believe
fato
in a
não
speed
é
of
o
transformation for
perspectivo, porque a
things,
gente está
which is
dizendo,
not really
nós estamos
possible
diante de
because
não apenas de um modelo econômico,
in
mas
the
um modelo
face of an
cultural, nós
economic
estamos
model, but a
lidando
cultural
com
model.
mentes mesmo.
We are
E a
dealing
gente,
with minds. Yes,
quando
that's
você fala
true.
da educação como um
When you
processo
talk
que
about
pode parecer
re-education as a process,
tênue
well,
demais ou
it
lento
may look
demais,
a
mas
bit
que parece
slow or
que não há
tenuous,
outro também, né? De
but it
fazer
seems like there
essa
is no
compreensão que
other
todos nós somos
possibility.
parte
Understand that there
desses
is,
desafios,
that we
nossos
are all part
comportamentos, o nosso
of
cotidiano, a
these.
nossa relação, né,
We are all part of
com os
this. This is
nossos
part of our
pares,
daily life
nessa
and we are
mudança
here with our
climática. Eu vejo
peers. And
que
this climate change
os cientistas reclamam cada vez
theme,
mais, né,
scientists
do imobilismo
complain
europeu,
more
de
and
uma
more
certa
about
complexidade nesse
government's
relacionamento que não vai resolver
immobilization, this kind
gasolina,
of sense of
mas não só
perplexity,
negacionismo, mas basta
denial,
você olhar
not
uma coisa
just
tão
denial,
gigantesca e dizer, eu não
but you
tenho o
look
que
at something
fazer,
so
essa
gigantic
luta
that
está
you say,
perdida, né? Como
this
é
battle
que
is a lost
a
cause, I can't do
transformação, a
anything.
transformação
How
cultural
and
também,
transformation is
sociológica, né? De modo de vida,
cultural,
de
actually, above
consumo,
all,
o que
in
que
terms of lifestyle,
cada um se
consumption,
comporta, né, diante do meio
how
ambiente.
each
E você
one
fazer isso de forma
behaves
isolada parece
before the
difícil
environment. And to
ter,
do
né,
this
parece meio sem
alone,
saída
this
mesmo.
seems
Eu acho que
to
esse
present
mobilizar
a
diante da
cul-de-sac,
questão
really.
climática tem a ver muito
This
com isso, porque cada
mobilization
um de nós
in
se
the
sente
face of
muito pequeno
uh,
diante
climate issue,
desse
we each
desafio,
feel very
que é individual, não precisa nem ser
small, excuse
coletivo, ou
me,
seja,
before this
para esses
effort.
resultados, para esses
It's
efeitos, a gente precisa
individual, but of course it's collective.
mais
But in order to
sintonizado uns com os
reap
outros.
effects, we
E
would
aí o
have to be
Breno, de Porto
definitely more
Alegre, faz uma
in tune with
pergunta
each
que
other.
ele fala
And
que
Breno
há um
from
distanciamento que
Porto
ele
Alegre
observa,
says that
um
there
distanciamento
is
do
a
ativismo
distancing that he
negro
observes of
urbano,
black urban
da causa dos
activism,
quilombolas e das
of the
causas dos povos
Quilombola
originários e mudanças
causes and the
climáticas. Ele
causes of the
presume
original
que esses
peoples
três,
and
vamos dizer
climate
assim,
change. I understand by the
grupos,
question
né, que ele identifica como o
that
ativismo
these
negro
groups
urbano,
that
os
he
quilombolas e
identifies
os
as
povos
black
originários,
urban activism,
estão
original peoples,
todos os
and
três mais
Quilombolas,
distantes
all
das causas
three
das
would
mudanças
be
climáticas,
distant
ou seja,
from
distantes entre si,
their
ou
causes are a
entre
bit
eles
different from
e
climate change. I don't know if
ao
among
clima,
them
e como é que isso
or
poderia
each
Não
one,
sei
alinhar melhor,
como,
né? Como é que isso
how
poderia
this
se
could be
pergunta
better
aproximar?
do
aligned.
distanciamento. Não sei como responder essa pergunta do distanciamento, porque eu acho que
I
na
don't know
verdade
how to answer this question
um,
about alienation,
é que está
distancing.
todo mundo lutando
The movement
pelo copo
is
de
that
água e está todo
we're
mundo,
all fighting
pelo
over a
menos
glass
no
of
que eu
water,
participo, nas
at
coisas
least in terms of
que eu
my
estou,
participation
junto com
in
muitas outras
the actions
guerreiras
and
e
programs that
guerreiros,
I'm in,
nós estamos
many other
lutando pelo
fronts.
clima em
We
tom
are
de
fighting for
coletivo, né?
climate with a,
E as
in terms
pessoas
of the
estão vendo
collective
esse
sense.
tipo de divisão
People
ou esse
see this kind of
distanciamento
division
pelo
or this
mesmo que eu estou
distancing.
vendo, né? Eu acho
I
que cada
myself
povo tem a sua
cannot see
história,
it.
a
I
sua
think each
originalidade
people
de luta,
have their own
mas no
originality and their
distanciamento
own
da
history
questão
of
ambiental,
struggle. But when it comes to the environment,
água e terra, né?
water
Isso
and land,
são ações
this
coletivas.
these are
Tanto é que lá no
collective
acampamento
actions.
Terra Livre
So much
está cheio
so that
de
at the
amigos
Serra Livre camp,
e pessoas
there are full of
empoderadas
people,
na luta do movimento do
empowered
povo negro,
people,
né, do povo preto,
vis-a-vis the
maravilhoso, que eu admiro
black
muito,
people's
particularmente o
movements. I
trabalho
admire a lot
pessoas que eu admiro,
black people and
estão todos
peoples.
ali no
I
movimento
work
lá,
with them a lot, and
ajudando,
everybody's there
buscando algumas soluções,
helping,
né?
seeking
Agora,
solutions.
particularidade de movimento, eu
Now,
acho que cada um tem a sua.
uniquenesses in terms of movements, well, each one
Talvez eu
has
não
Interessante.
its
tenha
own.
expressado bem a pergunta,
Yeah, maybe I
porque
think I didn't ask the
o que
question
ele viu, o que
correctly.
ele aparentemente, olha, eu vou ler
What?
exatamente como está aqui
Well,
sem
I'm going to read exactly as it is,
interferências
without
minhas. Bom dia,
any
Shirley. Sou de Porto
paraphrasing. Good
Alegre
morning,
e
Shirley.
vejo
I'm
um
from Porto
distanciamento
Alegre
do
in the south,
ativismo negro
and I see a
urbano
distancing
da
between
causa dos
urban black
quilombolas, os
activism
povos originários
and the
e das mudanças
Quilombola and
climáticas.
the
Como poderia
regional
ocorrer
peoples
esse alinhamento?
and
Talvez ele
climate
se
issues
ressinta mais no
distant.
ativismo
How
negro
can
então,
we align
que
this?
é os
Maybe
quilombolas, os povos
he
originários e
refers
a
more
mudança
to
climática.
urban black people's
É,
movement and not
pelo que
so much
você
the other three.
relata aí, é um pouco
According to
talvez
what you
diferente
have
do que eu
told
disse,
us,
porque
I
eu
think
disse
it's a
que
bit
todos
different from
eles,
what
os
I
três
said
movimentos,
because
estariam distantes das causas
all these
climáticas.
three
Não, eu
movements
disse
I
que o
said
ativismo
could
negro
be
está afastado dos
distant from the
quilombolas e dos povos
environmental
originários e das
issues.
causas
But he mentioned the three
climáticas.
black urban
Mas
peoples,
está
Porque
todo
foi
mundo
como ele,
Quilombolas,
misturado.
and it's a bit mixed up. Is that
É que não
como,
está
it?
todo mundo
Probably.
misturado, não é isso?
é,
Talvez cada
Yes.
movimento esteja na sua
I
particularidade
think
de luta.
each movement is
uhum,
unique in its own way. Probably
Eu
that's
penso
what
que
é,
até
is
o
meant.
demarcação de terra, a luta ao qual nós, povos indígenas, temos,
The struggle that we,
às
the
vezes não é
fight
igual à luta
that
do
we,
outro, né,
indigenous
do outro
peoples,
movimento
are
que está aí.
involved with are
A
perhaps different
proposta de
from
luta é
that of
diferente,
other
é outro
movements. The
sentido.
proposal is different
Então,
in their fight, in their
posso
struggle.
falar que talvez
We
haja um
can
pouco,
say probably that there is a
mas
bit of
no que
distance,
diz
not
respeito às mudanças
alienation, but
climáticas,
distance.
eu
But
participei
with
da
regard to
COP26
climate
e eu vi
issues, I
muita
was at
atuação, né,
COP26
de
and I saw
movimento
many actions
quilombola, do movimento
by
ativista dos movimentos
Quilombola
comunidades,
movements,
estavam todas presentes
urban
lá e
black
todo mundo
movements,
misturado falando
people's
sobre
movements.
as
Everyone was there
questões do
together,
movimento. Agora, no que diz
uhum,
with
respeito
their
a essa, né,
versions,
particularidade de movimento,
but this
acho
unique
que é
aspect
algo
of
a ser
each
discutido,
movement,
né? E a
it is
pergunta
something to be
justamente é de que
discussed.
forma todos esses movimentos podem se unir para
How all
atingir
these movements can
esse
come together
nível, né,
in order to reach
de compreensão coletiva
a level of
que diz respeito a
of
esse ao qual ele fez,
collective
né?
understanding
olha,
with
nós
regard
temos
to
uma
his
outra
question
pergunta
evening.
da
We
Natália,
have another question here
contribuindo
by
para
Natalia,
esse tema das mudanças
who
climáticas. Natália
complements
de Belo
this climate
Horizonte, quais
issue,
podem
climate
ser
change
as
issue.
ações
Natalia
práticas de
asked,
enfrentamento das
what can
mudanças
be the
climáticas?
practical issues to
É,
face
como
climate
eles,
change?
no caso, acho que vocês, né, têm
How do
feito
they, I think you, she means,
para
what have you been doing?
tá aqui. Como vocês têm feito para se articular por
What
meio de
have you been
organizações da
doing to
sociedade
liaise with
civil,
each
como
other through
conscientização,
civil
eleição de
society
candidatos,
organizations
etc.
to electing
Então, a
candidates
gente tem
and
muita,
forming
muita
pressure
parceria com
groups?
muitas
We have sought
internacionais,
partnerships with
né,
many
como eu falei,
international
tem uma
institutions
visibilidade forte de nos apoiar
who are very
nessas
visible
nossas
and who
participações
are
políticas, né?
supporting us
Então, a
in
gente
terms of
precisa,
political
como gente,
participation.
ocupar esses espaços
Um,
para lutar de
I,
forma mais
in order to occupy
firme, né,
spaces
contra
to
todos esses
fight
avanços racistas e
more
ambientais
steadily
que
against these
vêm
environmental and
avançando em nosso
racist
terra, né? O
movements
racismo
which advance
ambiental ele
throughout our
está
lands.
crescendo de um jeito que está ficando
These
difícil lidar com
movements,
tudo isso, porque ao mesmo
these
tempo que a gente
actions are
tem
growing so
o nosso
much,
racismo
it's
devido
difficult to deal
à nossa
with them.
originalidade,
When we talk about
ao nosso
racism,
espiritualidade, a
about
gente
our
vem com racismo
spirituality
ambiental
and
daqui a pouquinho,
originality,
racismo
we
isso, daqui a
see
pouquinho racismo.
environmental
É muita
racism
coisa que
and
está
then
se
other
tornando
kinds of
negativa.
racism. A lot are
Então,
coming
como
at
eu disse,
once
esse
in a
processo
negative
de
way.
negacionismo,
So
ele
this
diminui
denial
as pessoas,
process
deixá-las
tries to
pequenas,
demean and
tá,
diminish
tá,
people
tá muito grande.
is
E a
is
nossa
is
resistência é
really
essa.
big.
Nós não
Our
queremos
resistance is
nunca
that
nos tornar
we never want to
pequenos diante do
become
negacionismo. E é
small
isso que nós queremos
in
que
the
a
face of
sociedade
denial.
brasileira pense
And
também,
that is
sabe?
what
Porque quanto
non
mais
indigenous societies
existe
think
essa
as well.
mentalidade de
Because the more
negacionismo
this
da
mindset
sociedade
comes up
pequena, mais
of denial,
destruição
making society
ligada a
smaller,
todas as
the
amplitudes
more is the destruction with regard to
níveis
all
municipais, estaduais e federais
realms
vão
at
crescer.
the
E
federal,
nós vamos sair
state, and
perdendo, é
municipal
todo
level.
mundo. Então,
And
está
we will
se
lose
tornando
out
um
as well.
uma grande
So
chance de acontecer
there
a
is
extinção da humanidade,
a
devido
great
a todas
likelihood of
as
humankind being
situações que as pessoas não querem ter.
extinct, becoming extinct,
Então, a gente vem
because
buscando
people
parcerias,
don't want to
nós
be
buscamos
something or individually.
iniciativas
We
com
are
pessoas que
seeking
realmente
collective
querem nos
change,
ajudar,
partnerships with
querem
people who want to
nos
help
apoiar
us,
em
who
projetos
want to support us
agroflorestais, que é o que a
in
gente vem fazendo
agroforest
junto com os nossos irmãos
projects,
dentro da
which I
nossa
have been
terra, que é
working on
a
with
nossa
my
região, que é a
brothers
terra
within
carnaticina,
our
que a gente
Krenak
evidentemente a gente vai,
land,
né,
where
começar
we have
um
determined that
trabalho
we are going to
de
start
agrofloresta.
working
Então, porque nós não
agro
estamos acostumados, né, nós
forest
indígenas não
working.
estamos acostumados a ter a
We
nossa
indigenous
natureza
people
intacta,
are
entende?
used to having
Nós não
our
estamos acostumados
nature
a ver
intact.
destruição. Então, agora a gente vai ter
We
que
are not used to
aprender a
seeing
fazer
destruction.
tudo que está sendo
So we will
destruído
have to try and recover, bring everything that's destroyed back. For that, we need
né, que
friends,
queiram nos
institutions
ajudar com essa
that
nova
want to help
forma
us in this new form
de
of
proteger a terra, não é mesmo?
protecting
Nós estamos
the earth.
acostumados a ver as nossas
We are
terras
not
intactas,
used to
vivas,
seeing, we're used to seeing our
né?
land intact, alive, not destroyed.
É,
Passando
mas
So
elas
Yeah,
estão sendo totalmente
the
criadas
matter of
totalmente.
diversity in all senses, the agenda
essa
of
questão da
cultural
diversidade, em
diversity,
todo sentido, as pautas de diversidade
for one
cultural, elas
side,
se propõem
enrich the
ter
fight for rights. On the other hand, fragmentation is
os
also a
direitos, mas, por
challenge.
outro lado, a fragmentação também é um
I
desafio, é uma
didn't
dificuldade,
see
porque
before because some
por
questions
exemplo,
arrived
eu não tinha
late
visto antes, porque chegou
and
agora,
reiterate
mas como
this
essa
concern that was
manifestação
mentioned
também é
before,
nossa, essa
this
preocupação de ter
dissociation between the
diversidade,
agenda of the Black
essa
movement and
dissociação entre
indigenous
a
movements.
agenda
Micaela from Nova Lima
e das
says
pautas
it's
indígenas.
obvious
A
that
Micaela, de
Black
Nova Lima, fala:
movements
é
agendas are
indiscutível que as
not
pautas de
paired
direitos
with
humanos estão
indigenous
profundamente
agendas.
alinhadas à luta indígena. O
There's
apagamento
this
da memória
dichotomy
indígena
between
estabelece a
Black people and
dicotomia da narrativa entre negros e
white
brancos.
people, whereas indigenous
Historicamente, os
movements
índios trazem
are
essa
about land
narrativa,
reform.
inclusive,
How do
para
you
contar
integrate
a
this
história de Black
ancient
Power,
fight
como
and
integrar
bring
essa luta
it to light
ancestral
to
e
Black movements?
trazer para a população
Something
negra
that indigenous movements bring for centuries. You've answered it
há séculos.
somehow, but
Então,
maybe
você
you
já
want to
respondeu
complement that from this association with land reform and the
dessa associação que nós temos
right
com reforma agrária
to the
e
land,
direito à terra,
which is the indigenous fight.
a luta indígena.
We've been doing that, but we as indigenous peoples, we echo knowledge. We are an oral tradition. We don't push anyone. Like you have to come, you have to feel that things are happening. I feel that from my ancestors. If the Black movement is far from indigenous agendas, it is very necessary that people have the understanding that they have to listen to our indigenous peoples as well, and that they can see it as urgent to come and add even more, contribute even more, the more indigenous peoples are united in this process of making the global village, so to speak, and make politics the global village, fight for land, it's going to be very good. I have a very big intention to see all movements integrated, speaking the same language. We want to protect the environment. That's the language that all movements need to speak, the language of Mother Earth. And our indigenous peoples are doing that.
Shirley, tem mais 3 perguntas aqui que eu vou
Shirley,
tentar
we have three more
juntar, porque elas
questions
dizem
here that
respeito
I'll
ao
try to
patrimônio
join
cultural, à
in
herança
one because they
cultural
have to do
e
with cultural
à
heritage,
resistência
cultural inheritance, and
às ameaças, né,
resistance to threats
que a sociedade, de uma forma geral, que o modelo econômico traz
that
para os povos
society
indígenas. Mas antes disso,
in general
tem uma
um,
pergunta bem concreta aqui, que é da Karina de
works
Porto
with
Alegre, que ela
and
fala:
is in regard to
como
indigenous people. But
prevenir
Karina
a
has a
adaptação
question.
diante de mudanças
As
climáticas
risk
são
management and
aplicadas
adapting before climate
dentro das
change,
redes de articulação dos povos indígenas?
how is this adopted
Os
within
relatórios, como vocês
indigenous
mencionam, a
people's
defesa civil
networks?
tem sido
Civil
colaborativa nessa
defense
questão?
has been collaborative in this issue, have they not? Has the civil defense forces, well, if everything collectively worked on were back, the Dorsey River would already be back. If all work were going well, programs, etc., the rivers would already be without iron ore deposit. Which, what do I mean? Nothing is happening. We, as indigenous peoples, we are doing what we have to, our role, which is to make demands. When we make demands and question these companies, we want to recover the branches of our society, so to speak, in order to have a better life and to have a space where we can teach our children to be in contact with water before we die. That's what it's about. But in the state of Minas Gerais, especially in the state of Minas Gerais, the rot brought on by iron ore is still raping a lot of rivers and our whole state of Minas Gerais.
A Samantha de Brumadinho,
Samantha from Brumadinho
viveu, né, uma
asks,
experiência
well, she says she went
traumática
through a
do
traumatic
descarregamento.
experience similar
Embora
to what
existam
you
garantias
went through
legais, os
with the
direitos dos
Dorsey
povos
River.
indígenas à
In,
terra têm sido ameaçados
despite everything
constantemente
that exists legally,
por
the indigenous peoples and lands have always been
explorações
threatened by
madeireiras
conflicts with
mineradoras.
um,
Acredito que esses
logger,
fatores que
timber
afetam a
industry,
cultura e o meio ambiente têm sido
landowners, all
grandes
these themes
desafios.
that
A gente
affect
tem que falar,
culture
esses são
and the
fatores
environment.
que
These are all
afetam
factors,
dentro
she
de
corrects
regiões
herself,
em grande
that
escala.
affect culture and the environment
Ações e
at a
métodos
high
que você
level.
acha que são
What
viáveis para
are the methods
maximizar
and
esse
reactions
impacto
that you consider
negativo desses
viable in
fatores,
order to
né? Esses fatores
minimize the
de
negative
conflitos
impact
com
of these
agricultura,
factors?
pecuária,
Factors which
mineração,
are conflicts with agricultures, the timber industry, and landowners, cattle raisers, etc. It will all start showing its effect after political choices are made when it comes to voting. I think when the Brazilian people understand or start to understand viable political choices that they can make, I'm sure a lot will change because everything connected to these to what's connected to these questions has to do with politics. While our countries, as long as our people is in the hands of the so-called ruralistic people, landowners, agricultures, corrupt politicians, and land grabbers, it will be difficult to advance with positive actions with regards to environmental protection. So I think this year we must understand who we're going to give our votes to, what the person does, what the person is connected to, environmentally speaking. What have they already done for the environment? It's extremely necessary that people, the voters, understand this, especially in the state of Minas Gerais, where we see many leaders who who have to give people the right to demand their rights, especially those affected by mining companies. So change will happen, I think, when the intention exists for real policies to be put in action. The policies in our country do
E
not
aí é fundamental
are
esse
not
processo
for
educativo,
the
né,
people.
dentro das comunidades.
And that's why the educational process within communities is very important, of course. Yes,
Então,
you're
Shirley,
right,
tem duas outras
Sheely.
perguntas aqui que, de
Sheely,
certa
we
forma,
have
se
two more
casam.
questions
Uma mais
which I think
específica, mas que
are
talvez
matched.
possa te
One more
inspirar para
specific, which
responder.
maybe can
O
inspire you
Raed,
to
do site
answer.
de Mariana, ele pergunta:
Raed from
a
Mariana
onça
asks,
protetora, de sua
the book
autoria, quais
that
foram
he
as
wrote,
vantagens de compartilhar
The
uma história
Protective
quando
Jaguar,
você era
um,
pequeno,
well,
era
he
criança?
asks you
E
to
a Vitória, de Porto
share a
Alegre,
story
pergunta
from when you were
como
a
a Fundação
child.
do Patrimônio
Victoria
Cultural tem
from
sido
Porto Alegre
beneficiada
asked, how
pela
has
rede de
cultural
articulação dos povos indígenas.
heritage
Eu
issue
associei
been dealt with
essas
within
perguntas,
indigenous
elas têm
peoples? I
muita
associated both questions.
complementaridade, né?
They kind
Porque
of
o livro,
complement
com
each
certeza,
other
foi um instrumento aí
because
nesse,
the book was
na,
definitely an
nesse debate,
instrumental
nessa construção,
within
né,
all
do,
this
de
debate,
uma
this
ideia de
construction
agricultura.
of
Então,
an
a gente
idea of
foca num
culture.
aspecto específico
So
e a Vitória pergunta
it's
como
more
é que são os
specifically,
indígenas trabalham com
and the
questões
question
culturais.
is, how do indigenous peoples work on
Então,
this
o livro A
cultural
Onça
issue?
Protetora é o meu patrimônio cultural.
Yeah, that's my cultural legacy.
Né?
Você é mais do que
I
você.
mean, the book.
Eu tenho entendimento de que realmente
I have the understanding of what really
é dentro desse processo.
of it really means in
Então,
this
eu recomendo
process. Uh,
esses trabalhos
many
utilizando
people go and start their own
cultural
work
oral,
using our cultural legacy, our oral legacy,
patrimônio cultural
our
vivo,
cultural heritage
usando
at all levels
fazendo ações que realmente não condiz com o que a gente tem.
with actions
Mas a
that
onça
don't match
protetora,
what we think. But the
eu gosto muito da
protective
palavra
onça,
vantagem, porque não é isso.
my book,
Respeito a essas questões de vantagem, sabe?
I don't like the word
Acontece muito às
advantage.
vezes
I was going to say the advantage, but it's not advantage
a
actually.
gente mostra
It's a
a potência
sacred
de um animal
book. It shows the power of an animal,
que está sendo ultimamente muito violado,
which is being violated.
não está sendo respeitado, que é a onça, a gente vê
It is
em
not being
cidades diversas,
respected. The
sendo
onça, the
presos
Brazilian
na
tiger,
mata de China,
we
pessoas
see
com posses,
on
mas
social
hoje
media,
as onças
people
pintadas
are killing our animals, the onça pintada,
nos estados brasileiros e está
the
sendo
Atlantic
um processo.
jungle, and
O livro A Onça Protetora, quando meu pai
as
contou a
if
história para
they're
mim, ele
trophies.
contou a história para mim com a
And
intenção
the
de
book
mostrar
tells the story
para mim a forma que a gente precisa ter diante de tantas atrocidades.
of
A
how
história
we
conta a
want,
história
of how we
dos
deal with
ancestrais
so many atrocities.
e
It's
sobre
an
a
ancient
questão
story. It's told by our
de levar
ancestors,
adiante. Meu pai ficou
and
muito
I had the intention to keep it forward, to bring it forward to people.
coisas que
It is a
moravam
story that
na
tells the
Pedra do
story of the
Garrafão, que
people
hoje ainda
living in the
considera
Pedra do
garrafão.
Garrafão, the Garrafão
Um dia
rock
ele resolveu, como
that
ali
still
naquela região
exists.
estava faltando alguns frutos,
One
eles
day,
resolveram buscar
they decided to go for
meio
fruit
de salvar. E nesse processo,
because there was
dessas
lack of fruit in
comunidades,
that region. They
essas
went to other
transformações
places,
ocorreram.
and it shows the
E essas
transformations.
transformações são
And these
transformações que diz
transformations
respeito
are
ao
transformations
entendimento
that
do
have
ser
to do
humano
with the understanding of human
enquanto
beings
agente
as agents
especial para a Terra, sabe?
of the
É,
land,
o
as
livro
special
ele
agents of
mostra
the land. The book shows that. It shows that
nós
power.
seres humanos nós estamos passando por
We
diversas
human beings
transformações, diversos
are going through
problemas,
many
mas
transformations, many
como que
problems.
nós vamos chegar no final disso tudo?
But how do we get there? How do we get to the end of
O
that?
livro ele mostra essa resistência
the book shows that resistance and
mesmo que a
that
gente passe
power,
por diversas transformações
that
de
first we go through
saúde, no
these
corpo da gente,
transformations and many times they are
no final
painful
de
to our
tudo, se a
bodies.
gente entende
And
todo
at the
esse
end of all that, if we
processo,
understand the whole process
a
of
gente se transforma em
transformation,
seres maravilhosos.
we
Eles
are
vão
transformed into wonderful beings. And that's what the book is about.
Vou ligar aqui. Você certamente utilizou o livro
You
como
certainly used the
instrumento,
book
como ferramenta
as an
pedagógica no
instrument,
seu trabalho de educadora.
as a
Você sente essa
pedagogical
coisa, essa
tool in
relação com a
your work
escola?
as an educator. Yes,
O livro ele
yes.
foi lançado na Feira de Turim em 2003, se eu não me engano.
The book was
Pelo
released
Paulo
in
Coelho,
Turin in
mais
2003
intelectuais
together
da
with Paulo
época.
Coelho and other
E
intellectuals of the time.
nós fizemos diversos trabalhos em muitas escolas na Itália, na
We had
Alemanha, em diversos
lots of
países através
activities in
da força da nossa
in
produtora.
schools in Germany and
Aqui no
other
Brasil,
places, and also here in Brazil.
a gente sempre está levando essa história, sabe?
We are
Inclusive
always
aqui,
bringing this story.
agora,
Wherever I
recentemente,
go,
os direitos
I bring
autorais
these
dos
stories.
escritores comigo,
As the
a gente
author's
está
rights belong to
reformulando
me,
o
we
livro.
are
Estamos
reformulating the book,
trazendo coletivo,
so to
né, de
speak, and
artistas
bringing a collective of
que
artists
leem a história e reproduzem
that
os desenhos.
read the story
Então,
and
é uma
reproduce
releitura do
the
desenho e dos
drawings
desenhos que foram feitos com meu irmão, né? Meu irmão fez todo o processo de desenho. Então, a onça protetora vai vir numa
together with my
nova
brother. So the book is
versão,
going to have a new
porque ela,
version,
ela é
a
inclusive não
colorful
só
version.
uma versão
The
colorida.
previous
Então, é uma
version was
visão
black
de
and
hoje
white.
da
Now we
onça
have a
protetora,
colorful
que é
one, and
que todo
it
mundo possa
adds
ler
the
a
view of
onça
other
protetora
artists. That's the
e
mission,
o
that
entendimento
everyone can
dessas
read
transformações.
a Onça Protetora, the
Ele vai vir
protective
agora,
tiger,
recentemente a gente já está
and
terminando, e
it's
cada
going to be
semana a
released
gente
soon.
dá início ao
Maybe
lançamento
by the end of
da
the
onça
year, we'll
protetora
start
Turim do Ar.
releasing the new edition of the book.
Uhum. Então, o tema do patrimônio cultural, que é esse conhecimento
Yeah, a
acumulado,
cultural heritage is this
percebidos, traduzidos
knowledge
de alguma forma
accumulated,
presentes
new
nas,
ways or
nas ações
ways
educativas, nas ações, enfim, de
of seeing the world,
articulação
which is so present
de
in
processo de
educational
reflexão, né, de como
activities in the
a gente
process
tem
of
seu
understanding
papel e suas
the communities, the
alternativas, né,
role
nessas
of
trocas de
communities, their
relacionamentos,
alternatives,
nesse
their
processo de desenvolvimento
ways
que é tão
to
ameaçador aí nos seus
relate
dias,
with
né?
this development
Essas
process, which is so
muitas
threatening
que vieram
in
aqui
their
na internet. Eu não sei
surroundings.
se alguém quer me falar
Um,
aí se houve mais alguma
I'm
coisa,
not sure
Gustavo,
if
só
we
para
have more questions coming
reformular
from
se
the
você tem
internet.
mais alguma coisa
Gustavo,
das
uh,
perguntas ou se
you
a gente pode
people from
passar para a
the
Shirley
backstage,
fazer aí um fechamento da fala, algum
or
comentário adicional que ela queira.
maybe Shirley
Vocês me deem.
can
Por favor, eu
Sim.
tenho uma
go to
pergunta.
their her final comments. I have a question, Jurema.
Leandro.
Shirley, muito
Yes,
obrigado pela
Leandro.
sua fala.
Shirley, thank you very much for your talk.
Estamos te ouvindo.
Shirley, muito obrigado pela sua fala.
We can hear you. Thank you very much for your presentation. You can hear me, right? Yes. So again, thank you very much. It was very inspiring.
Primeiro, eu queria te dizer que
I'd like to ask you a question, but first, I want to say that one of the principles we have in this project, not only in this project, but other projects we have with universities and culture sponsors or and other communities of artists, is co-creation. We understand that everything we do is built together, that knowledge has to be built with the academia and the whole cultural world. I wanted to hear from you, in your perspective, how could universities do a better work together with you and not simply researching you, as you said in the beginning? Can you give us some insight
Eu
about
acredito
that?
que as universidades precisam
I
esquecer muito
believe that
essa questão da
universities
teoria,
need
sabe?
to
E ir mais
forget
para a
theory
prática, sabe?
and go
A
straight to
oralidade está
practice.
sendo muito esquecida
Uh,
dentro
the
das
oral character is
instituições
being forgotten in the
escolares, educacionais,
institutions.
faculdade,
federal institutions, education institutions, especially universities. Many indigenous relatives have a hard time to organize a new world without using references, readers, books. For example, if there is a relative of ours that is going to the PhD, usually they have their knowledge of people in their own land, and they could be using their knowledge. They could be using living characters, giving testimonials, giving information, but they can't because universities have their rules. They have to use a certain reader, a certain book. I think this should be forgotten. What concerns the work of indigenous communities, we should be more open to use our own knowledge, to use the knowledge of our communities, our ancestors, that our ancestors could be our books, if you will. So, not people who wrote about them, and we have to use the books that were written about them. I would like it to be that way from now on. So, it's a new perspective of working together, and that we get to know through the power of our orality. It's very challenging when we have a topic and we want to elaborate that topic, and it has to do with my culture, but I have to use the books written by other people, and it doesn't match what I want to build. And I have um, my own people, so they are living books. They are talking to me, and I can't use them. And there is this demand, and it's very necessary. I'm a living person, and I'm working. It would be a good idea to have this perspective, to use this perspective. That's how I think.
Muito obrigado. É incrível. E eu
Thank
gostaria
you
muito
very
de
much.
que essa sua
It's
fala
incredible. And I would like to
publicada
say that your
no livro
talk
Meus Falas.
is
Então já é um primeiro,
recorded on
não o
YouTube,
primeiro, mas um desses registros
and this is
da,
one of the
da,
first
da oralidade, dessa
records
sabedoria.
of
Então,
orality, of this
realmente é muito incrível.
knowledge, this
Eu vou
wisdom.
deixar
Thank you very much. It is very important to us. I loved your question because I'm I'm aware of the difficulties our relatives have, especially abroad, because I have some relatives abroad, studying abroad, and the international universities have the same problem. If they can give this opportunity to be open to a new vision, to a new perspective, which is a more real perspective, it's
é claro
truthful.
que isso é um processo longo de transformação, inclusive de
Of course, this is a
apropriação
long process. It is a process of transformation. It is accepting innovation, which, and this is key. One of the things of the Roots of Resilience project is that we're trying, and this is, of course, a tiny contribution facing that huge challenge, is we're trying to record these stories, these narratives, that cultural organizations could buy these stories, that understanding that this is the best perspective. It is very good when we hear that,
pelo menos está tentando andar na direção
and we're
correta.
trying to go
Isso é ótimo. Eu vou
the
devolver
right
para
way.
Jurema agora e
And
ele
I'll
pode
give the
encaminhar
floor back
para
to Jurema. So we're coming to the end of the session.
É isso, eu gostaria de saber se Shirley
Uh,
gostaria
yeah,
de
I'd like
fazer algum
to hear from
fechamento das
Shirley if
palavras,
you would like
ou
to
a gente
wrap
fica
up
por aqui, ou na sequência, né,
with
dos
your final
fechamentos, a gente
comments,
encerra agradecendo aí a sua
and then
contribuição
we'll
e as
close
pessoas
this
que nos acompanhou, que enviou
seminar
perguntas, etc.
with everyone
Beleza,
that
Shirley, você
uh,
comentar?
is watching us and asking questions. I would like to thank you all. I'm very happy for being open to that with this comprehensive conversation. And I apologize if I haven't asked, if I haven't answered any of the questions that have been submitted to me, but we learn day by day. I talk to my brothers and sisters, Douglas, Sonia. I love talking. we learn a lot when we
mas
talk.
falando uma língua
Everyone has
extremamente
their own
atual, que é a
gifts,
língua da
and we are
humanidade, né?
speaking.
E
We
que
speak as
todas
a
as
common
mulheres
language, which is the
possam
language of
estar
humankind, and that
nesse
all
momento,
women
possam sentir o
that are watch
cuidado
listening to
amoroso
me at
de
this
intimidade
moment can feel,
sagrada,
can hear this call
da intimidade que nós somos enquanto
of
seres
infinitude
humanos.
as
Chamado
infinite
Luana,
beings that
gritando
we
por
are.
Luana, está pedindo
Earth is
socorro.
calling and resonating
Se você ainda
and
não
asking for help.
escutou
If you haven't
esse
heard the
grito
call
de
yet,
Luana, por
be
favor,
open to it.
vai chegar a hora de uma ação
Open
imediata
your ears. The
para
time has
você
come for immediate action. We still have time
fazer ações positivas
to
pelo
do
ambiente e
positive
pelos seres
action
vivos que
for the environment,
estão pisando sobre a
for
terra.
living beings,
Então, eu peço
for
que
thinking beings,
sigam o Instagram, né, do
and
acampamento
I
vermelho
ask you
e
to
que isso
follow
possa
our
ajudar
Instagram,
a reforçar
use
ainda
social
mais
media
todas essas
to spread
atrocidades
the word
cometidas por esse
and to
governo negacionista,
shout out
e que
about
todas
the
as pessoas
atrocities of this
possam ter
denialist
entendimento da
government, that
potência da
all
vacina,
people have may have the
possam ter
understanding of
entendimento
the power
do
of
quanto é importante a preservação da
getting the
vida, né? Porque
getting vaccination,
se a gente não
and
preservar a
can
terra,
understand the importance of Mother
muitos outros
Earth.
vírus
If
virão.
we don't
E
protect
aí,
Mother Earth, many other
para se
rivers
milenar
will
com
be
as
killed,
nossas plantas,
and
o nosso meio ambiente, não
our
vai ter como ajudar também,
tradition
porque não vai
will
ter
not be
mais
able to help science
aquelas
because it will
espécies
cease to
ancestral da
exist.
natureza.
There
Então, a
won't
gente
be
tem que
the
entender
ancient
que tudo
tradition of
é
nature
colocado
anymore. We need to
igual, tudo
understand
vibra,
that
todas as ações
everything has
positivas.
their place, and that
Sem a
there
Mãe
should be
Terra,
this
sem a natureza,
balance.
não
Without
existe
Mother Earth,
a
without
ciência,
nature,
não anda
there's
sem
no
a natureza.
science.
Mas a
Science
natureza anda sem a
does
ciência.
not advance without
E é isso.
nature, but nature does go
Gratidão
without
a
science.
todos
That's it. Thank
por
you
esse
very
grande
much
trabalho e por essa
to you
abertura
all
de
for
conversa.
this great work
Erehe,
and for being
do meu
open
povo,
to
né?
this
Tudo de
talk.
bom
Erehe,
para
as our
vocês
Krenak
também.
people say. I wish you all the
Obrigada,
best.
Shirley. Nós aqui
Thank you very
agradecemos,
much,
aprendemos
Shirley.
muito,
We thank
extremamente,
you. We've
com a
learned a
sua
lot,
experiência e com a
especially
sua abertura
from
de
your
apresentação.
experience, from your
Obrigada a
opening to
todos.
dialogue. Thank you very much. Thank you very
Muito
much,
obrigado,
all.
Jurema.
Um,
Agradecimento especial a você também, além de
thank you very
todos,
much, Jurema,
por fazer
and of
essa
course, Shirley,
apresentação
but Jurema
tão
for the
interessante.
uh,
Pessoal, eu queria
moderation of that
aproveitar
talk,
essa
which was
sequência
so
dessa
interesting.
semana
And I have an
para
invitation for next
compartilhar
week. Our next
essa
webinar
reflexão, a sessão
is
2
Cultural Climate Action, Session
agora
2.
como as políticas públicas para o clima
Look
e para o
up
patrimônio cultural.
Public
Teremos
Policies
por
for Environment and
Leonardo
Cultural Heritage
Castriota,
with
da
Leonardo
Universidade de Minas Gerais,
Castriota
Luana
of
Campos,
the
do
Federal
ICOMOS,
University of Minas
e
Gerais, Luana
Rowan
Campos from
Jackson, da
ICOMOS,
Universidade de
and Rowan
Edimburgo, do
Jackson
Reino Unido.
of the
Só
University of
lembrando,
Edinburgh in the United Kingdom.
ficamos por aqui e espero que vocês
That being
tenham um
said,
novo na semana que vem.
I'd like to wrap up
Até
this session, and
mais
I
para
want to
todos
welcome you in the next session. Have a nice
do programa.
um, rest of the day to everyone in Brazil and abroad. Thank you very much.